Now that week 9 is officially behind us and we look back on it and just the plethora of storylines and just things to focus on from this past weekend, let's focus on the winners and losers of this past week going into the rest of the season now that we at the halfway mark of the year. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. My name is Ojai Brown. Let's get right into it. Before I get into my list of the winners and losers, let me preface this by saying just because you lost the game on your record from this week doesn't mean that I'm considering you a loser in the macro sense, because that's what I'm looking at it now that we're at the halfway mark of the NFL season. So just from a macro sense, where has this past week positioned yourself? And you could have lost the game, but there could be things that were positive and things that you could look forward to and everything in that sense. So let's get right to it. So starting off with the first column of my losers bracket is the entire AFC East, that entire division. Because when you look at that entire division, each team lost this past weekend, and when you look at just where they were positioned going in to this week, it's looking pretty bad. When you're looking at the Dolphins, and you played in Germany Sunday morning, you play in Germany and you playing against the Chiefs, and we all know the whole storyline about them not being able to beat above 500 teams and just being able to beat good competitive teams and beating down on bad teams. We all know that storyline, but I'm not getting into that. The reason why I consider them being a loser is because when you look at how the rest of your division played out, the Jets ended up losing, the Bills lost, and the Patriots lost. If you won that game against the Chiefs, obviously you would have shut the narrative down about you not being able to beat good teams, but you also position yourself, one, to be one of the best teams in the AFC and fight for that one spot in the AFC and have a game over the Chiefs, who are going to be right there with it. And also, when you look at how every other team in your division lost, you could have piled up a win in that division, and then you're 2 games above the Bills, who ended up losing to the Bengals, and you set yourself up pretty nicely. Obviously, it's still a half season to go, but you're starting to set yourself up in stride to win that division and get, a home playoff game. And now looking at the Bills, when you look at the Bills from where they were playing the Bengals on Sunday night, and you look at how the Dolphins ended up losing to the Chiefs, they dropped to 6-3. If you win that game, you're tied for first in the division. Well, not necessarily record-wise you're tied, but you already have a win over the Dolphins, which would put you first in your division. So that would allow the Bills to have a home playoff game. And, well, they wouldn't have automatically had it because, like I said, it's still a half season to go. But you would have been setting yourself up to start trending upwards towards the end of the year with a win over the Bengals, a good team, get some confidence. You're now holding on to that one spot because you're tied with the same record with the Dolphins, and you have that tiebreaker against them because you already beat them once going into this half mark of the season, So this was an opportunity for the Bills to, start to, from this bad play these last couple of weeks, these bad games they've been having, and start to pick it up and start going into a stride and really start finishing off the season strong like they've done in previous years. But they lost, and now they're 5-4, and it's just not looking good. And looking at the Jets, it's the same thing. Every team in that division lost, and when you look at those top 3 teams, the Jets were on a 3-game win streak. They were 4-4. They were 4-4 going into that game, and you are looking at a situation to where they could have potentially jumped the Bills because they have that win over the Bills. They would have been second in the division at that point in the year. And say what you want, you could argue that even going on later in the season, they would have just ended up downward spiraling. But you would have just started setting yourself up and giving yourself some confidence because earlier a couple weeks ago we were saying the Jet season is over, they're not that good. But when you looked up going into this game with the Dolphins losing and the Bills losing, and you go into this Chargers game and you win, you're second in the division. And now you're like, okay, you set yourself up, and they were playing pretty well on a 3-game win streak, and you ended up losing, and now you're back to square one in a sense to where Zach Wilson just can't do enough for you. Your offensive line is just borderline horrible, and Aaron Rodgers is still hurt with no real timeline on when he's going to be back and if he'll be back next year. He says he is, but things can change. So, it's just a bad loss for the Jets, and it's kind of a disappointing loss just because how you were starting to see a little bit of optimism within the Jets and what they were capable of doing going on later into this season. And with the Patriots, even if they won this past game, it wouldn't have changed anything for me. But the fact that they lost, I just included them in with the entire division with this losers bracket because it's looking rough. Mac Jones is playing bad. There's no real outstanding talent on that team to look forward to, and Bill Belichick, the controversies around him and whether they should fire him and whatnot, and whether he should still be the coach of the Patriots. It's just a whole nod, and the fact that they lost this past week. They're 2-7 now, and for right now, there's no real hope for the Patriots. If they manage to get the first overall pick, then yeah, that's good, but I don't think they would be the worst team in the league. I think they'll still be able to win maybe 4 or 5 games going towards the rest of the year. But it's just a bad year for the Patriots, if I'm being honest. And post Tom Brady, it's been pretty rough. Second in my losers bracket is the Cowboys. Now, when I say the Cowboys, I'm not saying this to be mean or just to be trolling on the Cowboys and to just trying to be funny towards Cowboys and the Cowboys fandom. But the reason why I say that the Cowboys are losers is because they played the Eagles, which is a division game. Dak played pretty well, and you had a chance to win that game. Now, you would say, then that's not bad. We're going against arguably record-wise, the best team in the league, and, we played them pretty close. We could have beat them. That shows that they're right there with them. Yes, but in the macro sense, you lost a game that you could have very well won if just some plays were made by your players down the stretch, and you would start to set yourselves up to start trending towards winning the NFC, because at that point they would have been 6-2, and they have a game already over the Eagles, and they would probably be trending towards first in that division. And from then on, it's really just about how many games the Eagles will continue to win, because the Eagles schedule is going to start getting harder because they play the Chiefs next. And with the Cowboys, I'm pretty sure they have one of the easiest schedules going into the back half of the season. So you would have set yourselves up for potentially winning your division and edging out the Eagles going into the postseason. But they didn't manage to do that, and now you're 5-3, and now you're really fighting for that wild card spot and trying to maintain in that wild card spot for the rest of the year. And hopefully you can start getting some momentum so you can set up Dak and them to get some wins going into the postseason. Nextly in my losers bracket is the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are, in my opinion, in the worst situation at the current moment when you look at, besides, I would argue, potentially not even the Patriots, because the reason why I would say the Panthers are in the worst situation is because, one, your number 1 overall pick, your quarterback that you drafted number 1 overall, and you kind of just projected him into the starting. You projected him as a starter, and now you're expecting him to go out and play well. But this year, he has been bad. He has just been bad. Now, I'm not saying Bryce Young is a bad quarterback. I'm not saying Bryce Young is a bust. I'm not saying Bryce Young cannot be better. I'm not saying Bryce Young is not going to get better. What I am saying at this current point in time, Bryce Young is just not playing well. He's playing bad. And when you traded up for Bryce Young for that number 1 pick, you traded your first round pick going into this year, and now in this offseason you don't have a first round pick because you traded it for the Bears for Bryce Young, and Bryce Young is not playing well. You traded your number 1 receiver in DJ Moore, who has hasn't had the best quarterback play, but I still believe DJ Moore is a very good receiver, and there's no outstanding talent on that offense. The offensive line is pretty bad, and it's just not looking good because you don't have a first round pick. Bryce Young has not shown any real consistent flashes this season. We can all assume and hope that he will start to pick it up, and it's just write it off as a learning curve, but it's not looking good. And the Panthers is looking even worse because reports that came out earlier during the drafting process that they originally wanted CJ Stroud, but the coaching staff wanted CJ Stroud, but they were overridden by the owner who wanted Bryce Young, and he loved Bryce Young so much. So it's just not looking good. And last but not least, last and least, I guess you could argue, in the losers bracket is the New York Giants. Looking at the New York Giants, it's just been a horrible season. I think they are right there next to the Panthers in terms of just the worst situation in the league right now. Because one, when you're looking at the contract you gave Daniel Jones, the contract you didn't give Saquon Barkley, and seeing how that played out now that we're in the halfway mark of the year, Daniel Jones is now injured. He tore his ACL. He's out for the year. But before that injury, he wasn't playing well. He wasn't living up to his contract. The talent you tried to surround himself with, the talent you tried to surround him with going out and getting receivers, going out and getting Darren Waller. And now that you look at it, the O-line has been bad, and now that Tyrod Taylor is hurt, and now that Daniel Jones is out for the rest of the year, it's not looking good. And in terms of just the way the season is playing out, the way Daniel Jones' contract is starting to look and result to in hindsight now, it's looking pretty bad. But now that we are past our losers bracket, let's look at the winners column. And now for the winners going into the halfway mark of the season, for number one is the Vikings. The reason why I say the Vikings is because although you lost Kirk Cousins and although you lost Justin Jefferson, and which he could potentially come back next week, you're now 5-3. When you started the year off, I'm pretty sure 0-3. You're looking pretty good. Now, obviously, Josh Dobbs, he is kind of a replacement QB and a bridge QB, and not the quarterback you would want, I would say, to lead your franchise long term. But I'd argue Josh Dobbs is a decent safety valve type quarterback, to where when Kirk Cousins is out for the rest of the year with a torn Achilles, I think you could have some level of faith that Josh Dobbs at the very least won't mess it up, because you have Justin Jefferson who could potentially come back. And even if he doesn't come back and he decides to just wait out and get his contract, you still have Jordan Addison, who is blooming, and from these past few weeks has shown that he is capable of being a top receiver, and he has the talent to be a great receiver. So when you look at that, you look at their division and how they could be second in the division right behind the Lions, and you look at this win streak they're going on and where they're projecting. They could potentially make the playoffs. Potentially. If they could potentially edge out the Cowboys. I'm not saying they will, but if they could potentially, they have a chance to get into that wild card spot, believe it or not. And if I'm them, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, we have a chance to even just get into the dance. And that way we could just, stay relevant as a franchise, keep our fan base happy, and have something to hang our hats on going into the next offseason and heading into next season. So I think that's something for the Vikings to look forward to. My next winners in the winners bracket would be the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Baltimore Ravens, they steamrolled in a 37-3 win over the Seattle Seahawks. And the Seahawks, which I think is still a pretty solid team, is a pretty good team in the NFC. And when you look at how well Lamar's playing, how well their defense is playing, how their passing game has looked, everything about the Baltimore Ravens right now is just starting to consistently go up. And I think at this point in time, you could very well argue that they're the best team in the AFC. And I know some people would write it up to the Chiefs, and I think I would lean more so towards the Chiefs, strictly because I've seen them done it. They have a lot of ugly wins, and you can see that they're just they just have a lot of winning intangibles within that organization and within that team, and just the history of that team. So you can't do nothing but trust Patrick Mahomes and the crew, and there's no problem with that. But looking at how Baltimore's playing, it's hard to not give it to them. It's hard to not say that Baltimore is the best team in the AFC right now. And for the way they're trending, and if everybody can stay healthy and they can maintain this level of play, I think Baltimore has a great chance to go on and just lock up that 1 seed. And not only lock up that 1 seed, but potentially make it to the Super Bowl, because the way it's looking, they are a top 2 to 3 team in the league right now. And I don't think there's no argument about that. You could argue they are the second best team in the league. You could argue they are the best team in the conference, in the AFC. So if you're a Ravens fan, you're sitting pretty. Nextly, on the winners column, we have the Houston Texans. And after a win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I don't think this is no surprise if you watch that game. CJ Stroud is the truth. CJ Stroud is the utter truth. If you watched about a year ago, it's coming up on a year now, I released a video where I was ranking the potential QB prospects going into this past draft. And I can't remember where I had CJ Stroud ranked, but I liked CJ Stroud more than Bryce Young. And the reason why I like CJ Stroud a little more than Bryce Young, I might not have him ranked over just because there were some question marks about, just how well CJ Stroud will play with a deficit of talent. But I saw that CJ Stroud, he had great poise. He was a great thrower of the football. He had great anticipation, great throws. He was just a great quarterback. And you could see it just watching him play. He had size, he had the ability, and even though some would argue he doesn't use his legs, he's not athletic enough, I think he can get by with what he has. And you can see he just has certain intangibles that you can't see on paper. You can't just put a stat to it. He just has a certain winning intangible that you can just see from watching the game, a certain poise he has. And if you're the Texans, you can't be nothing but glad and thankful that you was managed to get him at that second pick. You are thankful that the Panthers didn't take him number 1 overall. You are thankful that you didn't draft Bryce Young, especially with how their rookie years are panning out. And when you have a blooming wide receiver in Tank Dell, you have a lot of talent. You have a young head coach in DeMeco Ryan who is showing that he can be a leader of men, and he is becoming one of the better coaches in the league just from a standpoint of what he's doing with this team and how he's managed his rookie quarterback. You can't do nothing but salute the Texans. And if you're a Texans fan, you could argue what they can do this year, whether they could, potentially make the playoffs this year, what have you, whatnot. That's for another discussion. But going after this year, if you're the Texans, you have a great future to look forward to. And last but not least, the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans, even though they lost against the Steelers, I wouldn't say they are big winners in a sense, because I think that they just have something to at least potentially happy about with Will Levis. And when I say Will Levis, I'm not saying that I think Will Levis is going to be this star. He's going to break out and become an amazing player. It's only been 2 games, and we all know that usually defenses just have to adjust. They get a lot of tape and a lot of film on you. They start to adjust, see your tendencies, and after about a decent stretch of games, they start to figure you out. And then at that point, it's to where how really good are you? Can they stop you once they get a hold on you? Once they figure out what you're going to do? Once they figure out who you are as a player? But I think Will Levis has shown some ability, and if you're the Titans, that has to be something to where you can at least have some optimism about that you have a potential good quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to be a star. I'm not saying he's going to be great. That remains to be seen. But he has the potential to be something decent at the very least. Especially just seeing him play, you can see he has the arm talent. You can see he shows some decent anticipation and some decent poise. And, a decent bit of leadership. He has some size to him. And it's just a lot to look forward to. And when you look at that and you just look at how their season has been and how just these past few years have planned out with all the Derrick Henry trade rumors, how kind of the underperforming of Ryan Tannehill, and just kind of how iffy that whole franchise has been these last few years when they've been kind of good, but at the same time, it's hard to say they were really that good. They were really just kind of on the shoulders of Derrick Henry and Mike Vrabel. But overall, I think this is something to where you can at least stay optimistic about if you're the Titans. But that's all I got for this video. Let me know down below whether it's a team I missed in the winners and losers bracket, or if it's a team you disagree with in my winners and losers bracket. And let me know why down below in the comments. My name is Ojari Brown. Thanks for watching. Peace out.